So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, yesterday we talked extensively about some of the defensive gems from this 2023 NFL draft class. We talked about an edge rusher, a linebacker, a cornerback, and a safety, touching every level of the defense and potential players that could be late round steals for the Detroit Lions. However, we didn't really touch on the offense yesterday, and that is what I wanted to do today. Today, I picked out 4 players on the offensive side of the football that aren't projected to go very highly in the NFL draft, aren't getting a lot of hype or recognition, but could very much come in day one and be potential role players in an NFL offense or straight up earn a starting spot by time training camp is over and the regular season begins. So, with that being said, I want to touch on the underrated gems of the offense. I wanted to talk about the players that just don't get talked about very much and shed some light on some potential NFL draft steals. Now, before we get into it, if you are enjoying the Detroit Lions content, make sure you go down below and subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps the channel out a ton and it lets me know you guys want some more Detroit Lions content. So, with that out of the way, let's get right into taking a look at the 2023 draft gems. Starting off with a really strong candidate and a player that a lot of people are starting to come around to after watching the tape, that being Roshan Johnson, the running back from Texas. Now, I understand Roshan Johnson was not a starter at any point in his college career, mostly because he was sitting behind a guy named Bijan Robinson, who is probably the most talented running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, and arguably one of the best running back prospects of all time. However, that really overshadowed Roshan Johnson at Texas, who, standing at 6 foot, 219 pounds, and having a 4.58 40-yard speed, is a really good player in his own right, and I think would start at a majority of Division I programs. Now, Roshan Johnson last year for the Texas Longhorns played 12 games, had 94 carries, 545 yards on the ground, averaging 5.8 yards per carry, and having 5 rushing touchdowns. Now, this is almost exactly identical to what he did in 2021, where he played it in 12 games, had 95 receptions, 569 yards, and 5 touchdowns, while averaging 5.9 yards per carry. He is an extremely efficient back, averaging almost 6 yards per carry in the Big 12, and doing so on very, very limited touches. This is not a player that needs 10, 15 touches to get warmed up and then he'll break one off. This is a player that consistently churns out 4, 5, 6-yard gains and might not have the long speed to go for 80 yards and a touchdown, might not have the elite contact balance like Bijan Robinson, but this is a player that would start at 90% of Division I programs, somebody that has really good contact balance, somebody that turns broken plays into big gains, somebody that turns kind of poor blocking into damage control, and plays that should lose 2 to 3 yards turn into 1 yard gains. Plays that should be 2 or 3 yards based on the blocking turn into 5 or 6 yard gains. And it's a trait that both him and Bijan Robinson have. Of course, Bijan Robinson a little bit better, but if you're going into the 5th or 6th round and you need a running back that can be a bell cow, that doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires, and somebody that can come in and be kind of the next bell cow running back in your offense, there's no reason that Roshan Johnson can't do exactly that. Another running back that I think is really, really highly touted in this draft class is Zach Evans, the running back from Ole Miss. Now, sitting at 5'11", 202 pounds, he did not run the 40-yard dash, and I would say, based on the tape that I've watched, doesn't have elite speed, but I would say roughly probably runs somewhere very similar to Roshan Johnson, somewhere in that 4.5 range, maybe really, really high 4.4s, but somewhere in that range of not elite speed, but definitely speed that you can take it to the house. Now, in the SEC is a top running back for the Ole Miss Rebels, Zach Evans played 12 games last year for Ole Miss, having 144 attempts, 930 rushing yards, 6.5 yards per carry, and nine rushing touchdowns on top of 12 receptions for 119 yards. He had well over 1,000 scrimmage yards and 10 total touchdowns last year, while not even really being the focal point of the Ole Miss offense. This is a player that has really good contact balance, really good mobility. I think changes direction incredibly well, and kind of like Roshan Johnson, is just a player that might not be the 200 carry back, might not be the 200 touchback that Bijan Robinson is, might not be the 200 touchback that Derrick Henry is, or the 200 touchback that even, David Montgomery or Jamal Williams is. But this is a player that's going to touch the ball 150, 160 times a year, get you 1,000 yards of scrimmage, be a consistent runner. And again, an SEC running back that averaged 6.5 yards per carry and had 9 rushing touchdowns while not even being at 150 total carries. I think that speaks volumes to how good, how efficient he is and what he can be in the NFL. Now, obviously, the running back position is incredibly undervalued, right? It's a position that is replaceable. It's a position that you really go through a lot of players in a short amount of time. The running back lifespan is only about 4 years in the NFL. And by the time you're at the end of that rookie contract, it's not usually worth re-signing them long term to a massive guaranteed contract. Examples being Ezekiel Elliott, that just got cut after signing a massive deal after having 3 straight seasons of arguably being the best running back in football. Now, I could talk all day about the running backs in this class. I could talk about Kenny McIntosh. I could talk about Dwayne McBride. I could talk about Roshan Johnson, Zach Evans. I could talk about Chase Brown. I could talk about so many different playmakers out of the running back. But these are my 2 guys that I think don't get any hype at all, right? Roshan Johnson starting to come along, but Zach Evans particularly does not get the respect that he deserves. And for such an efficient player in the SEC, you'd think that he could get a little bit more draft hype. Both of these players being projected somewhere in the early to mid day 3, somewhere in that round 4, 5, even early days, or even early round 6 as far as draft potential. Now, moving off of the NFL running back prospects, I want to touch on the tight end position. Now, the tight end position is incredibly deep for the NFL draft this year. Of course, you have Darnell Washington, you have Dalton Kitnick, you have Luke Musgrave, you have Sam Laporta, you have Michael Mayer, just to name a few. But one player that is really, really flying under the radar, and somebody that I wasn't even fully aware of until going a little bit more in depth with this class, is going to be Payne Durham, the 6'6", 250-pound tight end from Purdue. Now, last year for the Boilermakers, he played in 13 games, playing in 533 pass snaps, as well as 210 inline snaps and 305 snaps from the slot. Now, he had 56 receptions on 77 targets for 560 receiving yards and 8 receiving touchdowns. As you can see, throughout his entire career with the Boilermakers, has been a red zone threat, has been somebody that's going to average 10 to 10.5 yards per reception, somebody that's going to be a big play threat in the passing game, as well as being a really good blocker at that size. 6'6", 253 pounds is not necessarily as big as a guy like Darnell Washington, but it is certainly above average size for an NFL tight end. And at that size, at that weight, he is a really, really good run blocker, as well as being a red zone threat, and as well as being a really good player down the seam, and a player that creates separation, a player that just somehow finds himself open in the middle of the field and gets a lot of production from that standpoint. And he had such a really good connection with his quarterback in Aiden O'Connell that they just hooked up a lot for some really big gains in crucial moments. And as you can see, last year, having 560 yards and 8 touchdowns while being a really good blocking tight end is a role that can be really good for the Detroit Lions. Now, I don't think the Lions specifically are going to take a tight end, at least not very early in the draft. But if you're looking for a long-term tight end, a developmental tight end, if you are not very sold on Shane Zylstra, or you're not very sold that you can contain Brock Wright for a long period of time, I think Payne Durham is a good player to have in reserve, and him mixed in with some Brock Wright, mixed in with some James Mitchell, could be a really good tight end trio that doesn't have a star necessarily, that doesn't have a top 10 tight end of fantasy points or a Travis Kelce type player, but gives you a really good core of trioing tight ends. Now, the last player I wanted to talk about today is a player that I mentioned in our mock draft a few days ago, but that is going to be Andre Isovas, the 6'3", 205-pound wide receiver who ran a 4.43 at the NFL Combine out of Princeton. Now, Andre Isovas is a really good player. Now, obviously, he didn't play any Power 5 competition, really didn't play any great competition at all, as you can see, but at 6'3", with the low 4.4 speed, he's a player that could very easily slide into the DJ Chark role of last year and contribute significantly. Playing 303 of his 358 passing snaps on the boundary. He is very clearly a boundary wide receiver, having 64 receptions on 85 targets for 924 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 14.4 yards per reception. This is a player that is not going to go very early, and honestly might even be there in the 6th, the 7th round, just due to the sheer depth of wide receiver in this draft class. But he is a player that can be productive. He's a player that has strong hands. He's a player from what I've seen, has high pointed the ball and has really good ability to go up and get it. It reminds me a lot of just kind of a little bit slower DJ Chark, but somebody that can make the same type of plays over and over and over again. And for a day 3 pick, for a round 6, round 7 pick, going out and getting a potential wide receiver of the future, I think that it's a really good opportunity for a team to go out and find a steal in the NFL draft. Now, with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Those are my 4 NFL offensive gems for the 2023 NFL draft. Of course, let me know down below what players I missed and if you want to see a part 2 of this video, because as I said, there are a ton more prospects that we could talk about. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, and as always, go Lions!